I think it really depends on what your time is worth. And it comes down to a question of time. And so for me, I would have loved to have met Tech my freshman year and have had him been my coach from the beginning.
Hi, everybody. This is Tech. I'm here today with Noah. Noah was one of my longtime friends, and he actually started his own Dragon Boat team. And we met, and I'm gonna let you take it away with how you've been growing as a paddler, as a coach. I think when I first met you, well, I'm curious to know, how did you first learn about me, and what were you doing at the time that made me resonate with you the most?
So I guess to frame the timeline a little bit better too, I started paddling in 2011 when I was a freshman in high school. And when you're that young and you're in a new hobby, any adult automatically has this level of, oh, he must know so much more than me. He must be way better than me. And I had started to pick up too that people had certain egos about that in the paddling community. And so sometimes I meet someone who is way better and they would act a little bit more on the arrogant side, and there are people who'd be a little bit more on the humble side. I met you at a random practice one time. I think you were back helping Stanford's Dragon Boat because they were
Mm,
at the same practice site as our team. I want to say it was probably after I already graduated high school. I might have heard your name a few times in school, but still being freshly graduated, only 4 or 5 years into Dragon Boat at that point. I'm looking at this guy. Wow, he's on a U23 and he's doing all this stuff. He must be really amazing at paddling, but also he seems really nice and friendly at the same time. Very humble, doesn't really act like he's all that. But I think the saying for that one goes is speak softly and carry a big stick. And that seemed kind of like the
mhm.
vibe I was getting, where you really
Yeah.
knew what you were doing, but you just seemed like a really nice, friendly guy. So I think we just kind of casually knew each other at that point, and we'd say hi to each other at races and stuff for the next couple years until I had actually reached out to you in 2019 because you were coaching SF Dragon Warriors and
Mhm.
there was going to be a bid for Club Crew
Grants at the time. Yeah.
qualifiers.
Mhm.
So I had never competed at that level and I finally wanted to do that, but also I wanted to, in my eyes, learn from one of the people that I thought was really good because I had saw the success that SFDW was having. And I figured if Tech is able to coach the team at that magnitude, surely I have something to learn by going out to practice that I can apply to my own team as well. So it was,
Yeah.
I wanted to improve as a paddler, do that bid, but also try to improve as a coach as well for my own students.
And so can you elaborate a little bit on, so when you were starting paddling, that was around 2011. When did you start coaching your own team?
So after I had graduated, I wanted to stick around and help out the team because I was going to community college locally, so I could still spend time doing that. I was assistant coach up until usually 2017 or 2018.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then I took over as head coach after that. So I think I had been head coaching for about 1 to 2 years before I had come out to DW in
Hmm.
2019. Oh, Mountain View Dragon Boat, yeah.
Yeah. And so when we started looking at potentially getting into your own training as a paddler, but you were also coaching at the same time, how did those two parts of personal development as a paddler as well as personal development as a coach, how did that support both of those for you?
So before I come out to DW, I had always been of the mindset of you should try to lead or teach by example. And so I don't want to just be like the guy in front of the boat, barking commands
Hmm.
and get people about what to do. I want to actually
Hmm.
be able to practice what I preach, right? And so if they needed a role model to learn from, I should therefore demonstrate and exemplify that in my
Hmm.
paddling skills, right? So applying that, going out to DW, now I had you to look at as a coaching role model and a paddling role model. So I could take some of your frameworks, things that you were saying or doing. It was because of you and Shao at DW that
Hmm.
I learned about it's like you want to give three pieces of feedback, one, at least one or two positive and like one. And I think
Yeah.
that itself was huge because it turned our practices from, I think a lot of beginner coaches might do this is they kind of stare at the
Hmm.
boat and they're like, they just don't say anything until you mess up, right? And that's the
Yeah.
bad part is that how are people going to know if they're doing something right if you don't let them know?
Hmm.
So even just
Yeah.
making a point to call out every single paddler on the boat and just give them one piece of
Right.
feedback, even if they look perfect, you just tell them like, hey, you look perfect, like just rotating like that, it looks excellent,
Yeah.
right?
Well, so I'm also curious to know kind of the difficulties that you faced before, kind of what were the challenges before that with coaching your team?
So to frame this, when you're a high school youth paddler or a collegiate paddler, you are in that grouping for only 4 years, right? So I think as an adult, sometimes, time is still valuable, but you don't necessarily have that deadline. You're not going to be like, oh, I'm only going to be able to do this for 4 years. The mentality is a lot different when you are like, wow, this is only going to be my team and my teammates for 4 years. And that really drives a lot of I guess, the motivation. And one large issue I had in high school years was that I felt like the coaching was largely ineffective. That was when the dragon boat slash paddling community was kind of at the point where a lot of people were doing it, the goodness of their own heart and they were volunteering. So, I mean, my coach was spending the time doing that. I just felt like his coaching framework was not very constructive towards learning like proper, to actually improve as a paddler. I had to do my own independent research, go to my own clinics and try to do all that. So the struggle was
Mhm.
I have the drive, I have the motivation. Where do I go to find ways to get better? Because I'm young, I have plenty of time, but finding that info was really hard. And it would
Mhm.
be far and few between. You'd have to wait months for a new coaching clinic or something to pop up. And then that basically took up most of the 4 years. So I graduated as a high schooler my senior year, never really accomplishing the things that I wanted to accomplish during my tenure on the team. Like I had a fantastic time, no regrets, but I would have loved to have been actually able to faster, so that way we could have done more that we wanted to.
Mhm.
When I became assistant coach slash head after I graduated, my main concern was I want to make sure that the next generation has it better than I did. So
Mhm.
how can we get you guys to get the things that we were never able to accomplish or achieve, right? Only after I started going out to DW.
How did you stumble upon take up this opportunity, and then how did that opportunity turn into you being able to support your own team growth?
So I was able to recognize that whatever I was learning from Dragon Warriors was highly effective at trying to kind of learning process, right? And so I was getting all that, the framework from you, listening to you coach all the time. And I'm like, well, I'm learning really, really from Tech. So
Yeah.
even if I don't fully 100% understand everything, if I just copy his framework,
Yeah.
hopefully I can get my paddlers to also learn as fast as I'm learning because I was improving at a very rapid pace as well. When I took that back to them, so I had a fresh group of new freshmen join like the prior, and they
Mhm.
had really good growth and development that first year. But I think where it really to take off exponentially is when I took some of that framework back to them. And like I was saying earlier about the positive feedback during practice, I saw that was a massive difference in terms of their improvement within the singular practice. Like they go in to the beginning of practice with not really a great understanding of what I should be doing, how should my body be
Mhm.
doing this, and they would leave at the end of practice like almost a good level of competence, right? So all those tips and tricks I was getting from you, the frameworks and everything, bring that back to them. They were learning at an exponential rate. And so I even encourage them too to come out with me as well on the weekends. If you guys want to get more practice, don't get it from me, the middleman, get it from the source, get it from Tech, right?
And so let's about some of the numbers. Like before you took some of the framework for coaching, what level was Mountain View Dragon Boat at? And then after the framework, how quickly and what sorts of success did you start finding?
That one has a little bit of context because I think like Mountain View as a team never really like got to the where we wanted to be at, where it was a full 20 paddler crew that was competing at the same tier. So there were
Mhm.
maybe about half the boat was really driven and really motivated, put in the extra time.
Mhm.
And I think that when you want the whole boat to compete at a certain level, like everyone's going to be bored at the same, tier, right? It's never really hit like competitive A division, placed in the top three, like some paddlers have too. But what they could also realize was, hey, I can still grow as a paddler individually by going out to
Mm.
these practices with Noah DW. And so several of them had actually expressed interest in going to those larger races, going for the CCWC qualifiers for France at the time. Some of them were freshmen the year before. So I believe now we're looking at their sophomore year when they really started going out to DW a lot more. And many of the girls, especially, were competing at the level for their time trials that they more than made the boat for DW's top crew Onyx and were able to
Yeah.
do the bid as well. And what astonished me is that they're putting out these results in less than 2 years. And it wasn't even a full 2 years of like Tech and DW. It was like
Yeah.
1 year of me and everything I took almost a decade to learn. And then the moment, like the catalyst where it really started to take off effectively was when I started coming out to DW and
Yeah.
having you coach me and them.
Yeah.
was when things really started to improve at an exponentially faster rate.
What were your biggest takeaways from working with me that helped you and your team grow the most?
I mean, I want a lot of it can also be down to mindset as well, because I think a lot of people might think like training is physical. I got to be out there like on the water. But I think more than anything, the mental framework or the mindset you go into your practice with, it's got to be intentional. Like putting in that is good. But you kind of need some structure to it if you want it to be as efficient as possible. And so, since I think you only have a limited amount of practices per week, and some people can't make it out to every practice. So, on our end, we were coming out once a week on Sundays. And with only that one day a week that we did, because the frameworks were there and the guidance and the leadership was there, it was so much easier for us to maximize our time.
What sorts of things did you change when
Hmm.
you started feeling like, hey, we want to level up? What was that you felt like you implemented that then gave you good return?
Hmm. So one was was it the pillar system?
Sure. Pillars of success.
Yeah, I remember that one.
Yeah.
There was another too that you did. I remember the pillars distinctly without bad levels of burnout or bodily injury. So one thing I had observed in my earlier years too that was really concerning to me was early dragon boat technique was not very effective in terms of long-term injury prevention. So I would meet older
Mm,
paddlers who had rotator cuff problems or shoulder
yeah.
problems because they would
Yeah.
try to brute force it. And even some of my seniors, when I was a younger high school paddler, like they would start to have shoulder issues or back issues. And,
Yeah. We're
like
talking
you,
about 18-year-olds, 20, 19-year-olds.
yeah, right. And it's after
Yeah.
multiple years of competing at this level, like, yes, the brute force and the strength is there and the motivation is there, but they just weren't using their body effectively. And it was actually causing unnecessary strain, which was leading to potential injuries. And I don't think that's a healthy, sustainable way to do any kind of hobby. I think we already saw eye to eye on many things, so that's why it was an
Mm,
instant gel because I'm like, cool, Tech understands catch, all that good stuff. So it was
mm,
perfect like to it. The biggest thing was really there's like overall sense of positivity, really. It was like very uplifting, supportive, positive, which in the Dragon Boat community is not always 100% present depending on what team you go to. I definitely know that
sure.
sometimes the competitive aspect can take over. And I've heard many paddlers before, like they get burned because it's just like too much, right?
Mm,
So I think you had a very perfect blend of sustainability with like healthy mindsets that you to keep training while also improving and you enjoy it. So I think the frustration comes when you plateau. You're like, why aren't I getting better? I just got to work harder. Like it's me, I'm failing, right? When in reality, you might just not be putting your time into the most effective things. You always try to add like a good with bad. So you try to make sure it's not always only strictly negative. Like if you do some sort of critique, you always try to highlight something else that's positive at the same time.
mhm.
And it was all those small little things I noticed you do that I started incorporating more and more of. And I could just see the instant feedback loop. Like there was a difference. Crazy, right? It's like you bring there and you get because people are
Positivity. Yeah.
happier. Yeah.
Yeah. After you coached your team and they were more successful, were there examples of future successes that kind of transcended just you coach, but then how did then your team kind of graduate and then go off on their own?
Oh yeah, tremendously. Like I'm gonna take, you know, major credit of their hard work. But I do
Mhm,
acknowledge the fact that you help kind of set them up for success, right? And so many of them had
mhm,
gone on to go to international. We did not make it through qualifiers, so we placed fourth, right?
mhm,
And I was really okay with that because I thought it was about the journey, not the destination. But then when you guys had continued to compete in the following years while I was busy with my business, then some of those paddlers had actually gone with you. So they had surpassed
mhm.
me in many ways.
Yeah.
And I felt great about that because I kind of set them a team and a coach and a mentor that I could trust their future success to. And then I think some of them have even gone on to be like head coaches of their respective teams as well.
Mhm.
And
Yeah.
it feels great to be a part of that journey effectively. I'd say for many of them, it's probably life changing. Maybe eventually they'll hop on a call and do a little testimonial for you too. But I definitely think if you stick with the hobby at that point, even after all the years, that it definitely changes the trajectory of your life.
How frequently did we communicate?
Oh, we were texting like quite often too. I'm lucky that I got access to you before it was something that you had to charge for because I respect the fact that you have a family now. So back then you had no kids, right? So it was just you and Ari. I remember when the first kid was born at our very first race of the season too. But now that you have three kids and a family, like your time is precious, it's more valuable. And so I was fortunate enough that back then you were still willing to give me those extra pointers, those extra tips during your free time in the middle of the week whenever I had questions. It's also the really cool part about being able to do this digitally now too, because even if there might be a paddler in another country, like being able to respond and get that one-on-one feedback is huge. Because like YouTube videos can go so far. A lot of times it can be about general topics, but if you really want that direct feedback and that connection of working with someone one-on-one, like that's where it starts to shine is when you can ask questions and get those responses.
What would you tell someone who is watching or reading this right now and is unsure about taking the next step as either a paddler or as a coach?
I think it really depends on what your time is worth. And it comes down to a question of time. And so for me, I would have loved to have met Tech my freshman year and have had him been my coach in the beginning because I probably could have achieved so much more with way less investment, right? Like I was bringing it, I didn't have the guidance. And so it took me, well over to get to the point where I finally felt like I could kind of end my on a high note. I run my own business now, so I don't really paddle anymore, but I was very happy with the point at where I left off in large part thanks to Tech, right? And that massive growth really only started happening in the last couple years after I had met him and started incorporating more of his training techniques. So if you're on a time crunch, like maybe you're a high school or collegiate paddler, but if you're an adult, maybe it just comes down to like, what is your time worth? Do you want to spend 2, 3, 4 years trying to figure it out on your own? Or do you just want somebody who's been doing this for over 2 decades now, boil everything down into a blueprint and kind of just give you that you can riff off of and try to incorporate in your own lifestyle to at least speed you up along in the process. You don't have to learn through all those trials and mistakes that you might have made or I might have made.
Well, any last words, Noah?
I just wanted to hop on here and
You.
kind of give people a little context behind, I think, how much time you saved me towards the end of my paddling journey. And really that when I started my paddling journey in the beginning, I wish that I would have had someone like you to kind of speed things, guide me along because there was a lot of frustration along the way for sure. And you don't have to take that frustration can lead to negativity.
Thank you, Noah.
Yeah, of course, it was my pleasure.
Thank you.
I think it really depends on what your time is worth. And it comes down to a question of time. And so for me, I would have loved to have met Tech my freshman year and have had him been my coach in the beginning because I probably could have achieved so much more with way less investment, right? Like I was bringing it, I didn't have the guidance. And so it took me, well over to get to the point where I finally felt like I could kind of end my on a high note. I run my own business now, so I don't really paddle anymore, but I was very happy with the point at where I left off in large part thanks to Tech, right? And that massive growth really only started happening in the last couple years after I had met him and started incorporating more of his training techniques. So if you're on a time crunch, like maybe you're a high school or collegiate paddler, but if you're an adult, maybe it just comes down to like, what is your time worth? Do you want to spend 2, 3, 4 years trying to figure it out on your own? Or do you just want somebody who's been doing this for over 2 decades now, boil everything down into a blueprint and kind of just give you that you can riff off of and try to incorporate in your own lifestyle to at least speed you up along in the process. You don't have to learn through all those trials and mistakes that you might have made or I might have made.
Well, any last words, Noah?
I just wanted to hop on here and kind of give people a little context behind, I think, how much time you saved me towards the end of my paddling journey. And really that when I started my paddling journey in the beginning, I wish that I would have had someone like you to kind of speed things, guide me along because there was a lot of frustration along the way for sure. And you don't have to take that frustration can lead to negativity.
Thank you, Noah.
Yeah, of course, it was my pleasure.
Thank you.